Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Pause the video right now to check out my social media, my radio show, and thatdrummerguy.com. And most of all, enjoy the following presentation. Hey, how's it going?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for reaching out for the opportunity to do an interview. It's been friends for a while, so I'm glad that we were finally able to make this work.
Yeah, no problem. It's kind of funny. It's like the album's been out for like 6 months. It's kind of funny to like do an interview and stuff now, but it in a way it's actually kind of cool because unlike all the other ones that I was doing before the album was out, I've actually had time to sort of like reflect now.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be the first thing I was going to ask you about as well. I mean, with Resolve coming out back in April, how are you feeling about the album 6 months later?
It's funny. Like I'm, as far as like the way the band feels about the album itself, I mean, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that we all think it's by far the best thing we've done, and it seems like most of our fans are really in agreement with that as well. Like I recently kind of did like a poll in our like fan group or whatever that we have on Facebook, and it was no contest that it seems like amongst our established fan base, everybody really thinks that this is the best album that we've done so far. But like it's weird, it seems like it's gotten more negative press than the first two albums, but I chalk a lot of that up to the fact that the band's just getting bigger, and the bigger we get, naturally, the more people are just going to be shitty on purpose just because they think they have to, and also like we're just getting exposed to more and more people, and with the more exposure just comes exposure to more people who aren't going to like it. And the interview review community, I think, kind of puts this like pressure on people to listen to a lot of music very quickly. And when you're like an underground, like lesser known band like we are, when you release a 67-minute concept album that I feel like it takes a few listens to really start to get and appreciate, you're just going to get a lot of people that just don't feel like putting in the time, which I think is where the big disconnect between our fans and some of these other like negative reviews are concerned, where it just it just seems to have a lot to do with how much time people put in. But yeah, we're still like super proud of the album. It's definitely like a kind of album that I always wanted to make.
Yeah, and you raise so many great valid points when it comes to that, too. I mean, there are so many people who do reviews just based on the first listen, or maybe just the first day of having an album, and they don't really divulge in everything where it comes into the lyrics, or the concept, or just, it's like, there's a 10-plus minute song on here, I'm not going to listen to all that, and, it's just like they want to be able to, like, get things out as quick as possible rather than take everything in. So, with that, amongst, just like you mentioned before, with the rise of popularity with the band and the exposure that you guys have gotten is always going to bring negative people out just because they don't like the style of music. Not saying that you guys are bad in any way, but it's just like you get some of the very true metalheads that just like they don't appreciate anything that comes close to what you guys do in MindMaze.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's weird, too. Like, we kind of sit in this gray area between a lot of, like, metal subgenres, which was sort of always my intention with this band, because I'm not really just a fan of power metal or progressive metal or, like, old-school heavy metal or, like, AOR, hard rock, whatever. Like, I kind of like it all, and I sort of wanted to have a band that sort of marries elements of all of those styles together, which to me, I think is really cool. And it seems like a lot of the people that are our fans seem to think it's cool for the same reason, that we're kind of like a mixed bag of those subgenres. But because of that, I think we get like some extra kind of like negative stuff from people where the hardcore power metal fans, we're not cheesy enough for them, or we don't write enough like fast by the numbers kind of typical power metal songs, and then like the true prog metal guys think our music's too by the numbers, or we're not proggy enough or whatever. And there's with all the like sort of like retro traditional metal stuff going on these days, there's just not a lot of like there's a lot of like negativity towards albums that are perceived as being well produced, and songs being too poppy, and especially having a female singer too. Like, it seems like the only two acceptable styles of female vocals sometimes are either the chicks that essentially are just yelling, it's just really, really aggressive, like, type vocals, or the more like symphonic operatic stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like, we don't fit into either of those boxes. And I think sometimes it's like harder to find our like target demographic or whatever because of that.
And with that, I mean, that's why I admire you guys so much, because you hear this negative stuff that people say on there, and you don't let it affect you enough to change the sound to appease the fans. I mean, you just continue on making the music that you want to make, and the loyal fan base that you guys have made is still there.
Yeah, it's funny, like, it definitely seems like, in a way, each album has kind of been a reaction to the one before, but not so much in that we're like really caving to negative press or anything like that. But when it comes to like our actual fans and stuff, I welcome people's feedback. I love knowing what people really like about each album, or the things that they weren't as crazy about. And it's like, we kind of take that into account, as well as we just take our own personal feelings into account. Each album has kind of just been like a little bit different based on like sort of where our musical headspace was at the time. And I'm not interested in making like a carbon copy of the same album twice, which again, as a newer band, I think kind of like puts you in sort of a weirder place, because I think some people kind of expect you to just kind of keep ramming the same idea home over and over again. And I mean, I'm not going to say that all three of our albums are like really, really different, but there's definitely like some evolution and growth there. And I think each album kind of has a slightly different like aesthetic to it, where like the first album, Mask of Lies, to me feels more in the vein of like traditional kind of old school metal, and then the second album, Back from the Edge, was a lot more of like a power metal album, and then Resolve is much more of like a prog metal album.
Yeah, and I've noticed that as well. I mean, with every time that I've checked out an album from you guys, I mean, I've always heard like there is like a core element to the sound, but it's just like you are able to branch off just enough to have every album have its own distinct sound, and that's something that's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I think the fourth album, when eventually it happens, we're still a good way away, but we started writing already, and we're definitely planning to, as different as any of the stuff so far has been from whatever came before it, the next album will be at least as different from anything we've already done.
And with that, I mean, of course, with getting a very solid rhythm of being able to record albums, I mean, with just the amount of time that you guys have been around, I mean, the fact that you guys are already working on the fourth album, and let alone being able to do some great touring that comes along with that. What has been the most rewarding aspect about being able to branch out as much as you guys have?
We're really only able to like do all the stuff we can do because of the relationship we've established with our fans, and with crowdfunding and all that. And it's really just like amazing the support we've gotten from people, and like that's probably the most rewarding thing to me, is just it still is crazy to us that there's people out there that like all over the world, and that we've never met, or whatever, that are like really, really seriously like emotionally invested in this band, and like want to have a sense of investment in us. And the way like I'm a big music fan, and I've spent the majority of my life at this point being like a music fan, and it's so weird to see that that sort of appreciation that I've given towards bands I really love, to see that come back is probably like the craziest thing. Like we just have moments where we're just still in awe about it. Like, that we just did our first, I shouldn't even say just, it's been like almost, I guess like 5 months at this point, but back in the spring we did like our first proper full-length US tour, and we did some Canada shows too. And you know, to go to some of these places that we've never played before and, you know, meet people that have all the albums and, you know, wanted them signed and wanted pictures with us, and, you know, and then when we play, they're singing along to the songs, and that's still just so surreal to me. And like, you know, I have no misconceptions about the fact that we're still a very like small underground band, but just, you know, being able to see that stuff is just so surreal. And, you know, I'm just like so thankful that those people are out there.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing too. I mean, especially when it does come to the crowdsourcing, because who knows how the band would have turned out had you not noticed the internet fan base like grow and grow every time that you guys do the crowdsourcing campaigns. I mean, everything could have gone in a completely different direction with the band.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it without the existence of you know, us doing the crowdfunding stuff. I wouldn't say that we wouldn't exist or anything, but things would just be moving on a much slower timetable, because, you know, after, you know, we funded the majority of our debut album out of our own pocket, and, you know, it was kind of slow to make because of that, because we needed to actually have the time to save up money for studio time and save up money for pressing and artwork and, you know, all that. So, you know, it was a bit slower, and it's like the difference is that now that we know that the support from people is most likely going to be there, we have the ability to just sort of plan in advance and say, okay, well, we're going to start writing, and then we'll, you know, run our campaign to fund our next album, and, you know, we'll pretty much immediately then be able to get back into the studio and have the money to cover the studio time and the album production costs, and, you know, then release it. So it's definitely helped establish that, you know, regularity, where it's like Mask of Lies came out in February of 2013, and then Back from the Edge came out about a year and a half, or like a year and 8 months or something later, in late 2014, and we put out an EP in 2015, and then Resolve came out earlier this year. And yeah, it's just that like foundation has really helped, you know, get things rolling. Whereas it's like if we didn't have that ability, it would just be, you know, probably like at this point we'd probably only be on our second album, and, you know, I'm not sure how much of some of the touring that we've done we would have been able to do. And, you know, as a band, none of us are really in great financial shape. You know, we don't have the ability that, even if, you know, one of us felt like it, we can't throw major money at the band. It's just, you know, from time to time we can chip in, you know, here and there out of our own pocket, and when we go on tour we pay out of our own pocket to a point to cover expenses and, you know, all that. But like, it's just so much more, like I said, it's just so much more efficient, I guess, to be able to have that.
And with that said, I mean, when you guys are able to be on the road, I mean, whether like you're doing a full-scale tour, the mini tour, and stuff like that, what have you learned the most about being in a band from being able to be on tours like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of it is like, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest thing is that like there starts to be a divide with bands, between bands that have done real tours and bands that haven't, where, you know, kind of coming back now and playing like local level shows in between tours and stuff. We see this a lot where, you know, when we did our first, you know, legit tour, which was supporting Saxon and Armored Saint in 2015, you know, you learn really quick that you gotta, you know, you have to like know your place in a sense. Now, everyone involved in that tour was, you know, super nice to us. It was an incredible experience. I have nothing bad to say about anyone or anything about it, but, you know, you have to learn to respect that, you know, you're the opening band. you can't just do whatever you want to do. You get your sound check when you get it after the headliners are done. You don't play over your set time. You don't, overstep your boundaries. And, like that type of stuff is like really, really valuable lessons, I think, for a band to learn. So there's that. And then there's also just the fact that, like, you just learn to... Things are just way different when you go out and play shows on the road. I mean, one of my favorite things about being on tour is that, like, when we play shows individually, I tend to stress a lot about the shows. And when you go out and do a tour, it's a lot easier to not get like that because, if you have kind of an off night or whatever, there's however many more coming. Now, that's not an excuse to like kind of have shitty shows or whatever, but, it just helps ease my nerves a little bit to be like, well, if this one isn't perfect, then we have, another one coming and, all that. And I guess the other thing is just that it's just a lot of hard work going out as a band on our level because, like, we don't have anybody come with us most of the time. It's just the band. So, we're our own merch people, we're our own crew, we're our own driver, we don't get any, breaks or any luxuries. We have to do everything ourselves. And, it really, really wears on you, especially when you do a tour where, you have to play 2 consecutive days where the shows are like 9-10 hours apart. It's, it's just brutal. Like on the tour we did this past spring, we played in Portland, Oregon, and then the next day we played in Oakland, California, which I think it's about 9.5 hours overnight. And, it was just brutal. Like, you have to drive till like 5 in the morning or whatever, and then get up like after only a couple hours sleep and drive like 5 more hours. And it's kind of hard to always be on top of your game when you have to do all of that other stuff. And sometimes the stress kind of builds up and it gets to everybody. And I think you have to just kind of learn to give each other space and learn to, just sort of be like, yeah, it is what it is, it'll pass. And eventually enough good stuff happens and you kind of forget about the bad stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's especially people who aren't actually playing music themselves. I mean, there's so much that people don't realize that really goes into not just being in a studio band or in a touring band, but just in a band in general. I mean, there's so much that goes into the business side. There's so much that goes into logistics. I mean, there's so much that goes into everything. And when you get thrown into situations like this, I mean, it can really make or break a band. And the fact that you guys were able to come out so strong and be able to land tours like playing with Arm Saint and Saxon, or the tour that you did this earlier this year. I mean, the fact that you were able to go through all this, continue to keep being a strong band, and know that that's what you want to keep doing. I mean, it really shows the dedication that you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the personal chemistry sort of, when we did that Saxon Armored Saint tour back in 2015, we had just recently changed drummers. Our original drummer, we parted ways with him in like the summer of 2015, and we did like a small mini tour on our own. That was the first thing we did with our current drummer, Mark, and then we did the Saxon tour with him. And in the beginning, we had no idea if our working relationship was going to be permanent or not. For about the first like 6 months or more, we didn't actually list Mark as a band member because we weren't, it all happened very, very quickly. Our ex-drummer left when we were only a few weeks out from that first mini tour. So, Mark came in and learned enough material for us to go out and do those tours. But we didn't really know at the time if that was going to be a permanent arrangement. But after about 6 months to a year of working together and doing a bunch of mini tours in that Saxon tour, and, we kind of were like, well, in addition to sounding better than we ever have before, we're still getting along. And, if you can be in those situations and still, like each other after that much, it's I don't want to say it's rare, but it's definitely something to, value, and it really just helped sort of make us go, okay, well, I guess this is the lineup that we actually want to have going forward. And I mean, that's really the reason why Mark wasn't really super involved with the making of Resolve, because we actually were already in the process of writing and starting to record the album when we weren't even 100% sure if he was going to be in the band permanently. So that's why actually he and I split the drumming on the album. But yeah, that personal chemistry from touring is something that, yeah, if you don't like each other, it's really gonna come out.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, I've been a part of so many bands, and I know so many bands. I mean, just from playing local shows where like the tension starts to build up there. I mean, let alone being able to get out and start touring and start getting the notoriety that you guys have. I mean, you got to have that chemistry on and off the stage. If you don't have that, then something's gonna give.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're together nonstop, like pretty much every, minute of every day for, weeks on end. Yeah, it is kind of like being married to somebody or living with them or, whatever. It's like after time, some of the little things that you might have just been like, yeah, whatever, I can learn to ignore this. Eventually you get to a point where you're like, no, this really, really bothers me. But, thankfully, yeah, we're about 2.5 years with this lineup now, and it's actually the longest we've ever had a, consistent lineup, and the longest, any incarnation of any band I've been a part of has ever had the same lineup. So, considering what we've done in those 2.5 years as well, I think, it's definitely a really good thing.
And how much do you think that's gonna change the next album? I mean, with the fact of having a lineup this solid, how much do you think that's gonna affect the next album?
I would say pretty dramatically. We're, like I said, we're already writing. We're planning on releasing another EP next year, actually. It was kind of a decision we made where we're like, well, we can either kind of scale back on playing next year and get back into the studio and do a 4th album, or we can, just allot the studio time to do an EP and get back, out and try to do more touring throughout next year. And it seemed like most people thought that was kind of really the best option. So we're going to be doing an EP that'll probably be out next summer, that we're getting ready to go into the studio for now. And we have a couple of new songs that are going to be on that, as well as we have a handful of other songs that we wrote at around the same time that are going to eventually end up on the 4th album. And I mean, there's already just like kind of like a huge difference in the way we're approaching things, where in the past, especially with the first 2 albums, I was by far like the songwriter. Not that nobody else in the band had any input whatsoever. There's a couple of songs with co-writing credits on the first 2 albums, but by and large, I was bringing in pretty thoroughly formed songs, musically anyway. But with Resolve, our bass player Rich brought in a lot of stuff too, and he and I worked collaboratively a lot. But we weren't really writing as a band. It was just kind of Rich and I just like sitting at my house, chucking ideas around and seeing what happened. And because of the structure of Resolve and it being a concept album, we kind of just wrote without like even necessarily at times forming, fully finished songs. A lot of it was more about just stockpiling musical ideas so that then we could, put them wherever we wanted to on the album to fit the concept of the album. But moving forward, I mean, we're definitely going back into much more like typical, I guess what you'd call like song-based approach, where we're really trying to concentrate on just writing great individual songs, where each song stands on its own. And we're just writing and arranging a lot more as a group, as a band, just, collaboratively, everyone's having a little bit more input. And, I mean, I really, really like it. I just feel like this is the best band I've ever been in terms of just what everybody brings to the table, and I really, really love the way the new stuff's sounding, and we're really trying to go for more of like a I guess like an old school like hard rock type approach to us in a sense. Not that this won't be like predominantly a metal album, but it just has like more of a solid rock band kind of feel to the way a lot of this stuff kind of feels to me, which is really cool. I'm really into that. Like I'm really into like a lot of 70s stuff, and when bands did basic tracks and stuff in the studio live as a band, and this material just feels like it has a lot more of that in it. And we're also not being we're really trying to not be afraid to just keep working at revising these new songs over and over and over again until we really feel we have something great. I definitely think there's like there is value sometimes in just kind of going spur of the moment, and sometimes what you come up with on the spot is like the best you can do, but we're really just trying to refine and making sure that every part of every song is just the best it can be. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's been a really rewarding past couple of months working on all this new material together.
And that's definitely the way it should be. I mean, there's so many trials and tribulations that goes into being in a band, but when you are able to find the right lineup, when you do have that right writing chemistry, song playing chemistry, all of the chemistry. I mean, when you're able to just line everything up and it starts going in the right direction, I mean, there's no better feeling when you're a musician.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Yeah. I guess it wasn't that important.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, awesome. I mean, yeah, again, it's just like it's so awesome to see like how far you guys have come in such a short amount of time too. I mean, with like all the notoriety that's been coming along. I mean, the fact that the crowdsourcing has been able to help you guys so much, all this great touring opportunities and everything that's going to be going on in 2018. I mean, I'm very excited to see what's going to be going on for you guys, and I just imagine that things will just continue to get bigger and better from here. I mean, if you guys were able to accomplish this much so far, it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I mean that's what we hope anyway. I mean, fortunately, we have been on what I would consider like a steady incline over the past 5 years, and at times it actually creates sort of like growing pains for the band because we have like the wonderful burden of, sometimes we can't anticipate how many units to get pressed of things, or, how many t-shirts we want to print, or, any of that stuff, because it usually just seems like we never anticipate exactly how much we've grown since the last time, which again is a great problem to have. But we pressed X number of copies of our debut album, and sold out of them, and then repressed it. And then when we signed with our label, we sold twice as many copies of the second album in the same amount of time as the first album. And now with Resolve, it's been even better than that. And yeah, it's definitely like a really cool thing, and I mean, for sure, I think we're gonna keep at it and keep trying to see where we can go and what we can accomplish, as long as we continue on this trajectory, because it's just really it's really cool, it's really exciting. Yeah, like I said, next year we're looking to release the EP hopefully by the summer, and then on top of that, just doing more touring. It's probably going to be more in the vein of like mini tours and stuff, where we're going out, on our own, where it's technically like us as a headliner playing, small bars and clubs and whatever, with like some local bands or whatever on the bill as well. It's not as necessarily as good for, it's definitely usually not as good for exposure doing that type of thing as doing like the support tours, but for a small band like us, the money is usually better going out on our own, which helps in the long run. So, if we were going to do another support tour next year, that would probably be it. Other than playing locally or regionally, that would probably be all we could do. We could have one support tour, for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then that would be it. But if we go out on our own, we can, probably go out a bunch of times, for about a week or whatever at a time, and we'll probably just do a few of those and just kind of like isolate certain areas. Like we'll probably do one that's like the Midwest and one that's the Southeast, and stuff like that. So that's mostly what next year is going to be, and then 2019, I guess, we'll probably be concentrating on making the fourth album. But it's really weird. Like the last couple of years, I've gotten into this habit now of having to always, like, I'm always thinking 6 months to a year or longer or ahead of where we are. That it's like I always feel like I'm just kind of like living life like in the future tense or whatever.
But that's a great way to go about it. I mean, when you already have these goals and mindsets in mind, it gives you something really to work forward to and make sure that you are able to do the best that you can with it. I mean, whether you go with the mini tour routes next year, you do get that support slot for a tour if the opportunity arises, or you just decide to focus more onto the writing. I mean, the fact that you do have these goals in mind, I mean, it's definitely something that helps progress the band.
Yeah, it's like I said, I'm a big music fan, and Iron Maiden's my favorite band. And if you watch like any of the documentary things, the band and their management talk a lot about how throughout their career they've always sort of had like a 5-year plan. That at any given point they kind of have a vision for like, this is what we want to accomplish next year, this is what we want to do the year after that, this is what we want to do the year after that. And I wouldn't necessarily say that we have a 5-year plan, but at any given moment we usually have at least a plan for the next year and a half, or something like that, where I wouldn't say that we always necessarily meet every single goal, just because some things are kind of beyond our control, especially with like support tours and stuff. You can't really create those opportunities. It's just a matter of right timing, right deal financially, or right everything. Like we've been offered a bunch of support tours that we didn't take for various reasons, between timing and money and just logistics and all that. So it's just, in a way, you kind of get what you get, and it's like we just it's kind of just up to us to make the right decisions for are they good uses of the time and money that we have to work with, and all that. But like I said, it's like I feel like if you lay out a plan, it gets a lot easier to sort of, budget time and, all that stuff.
Yeah, very much so. And, again, I can't say it enough. I mean, it's just awesome to see within these past 5 years of being MindMaze how far you guys have come along. And, again, it's just like the trials and tribulations of being in a band, different lineups, bad shows, studio issues. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen to a band, but just everything that you guys have gone through so far has just made you a stronger band. And the fact that you are able to get into that rhythm of already thinking like a year and a half ahead, making all these ideas in mind, knowing that everything is going in the right direction with the band, I mean, it's definitely a good sign that you guys are going in the right direction.
Yeah, and like another thing that really helps us be able to do that is that we kind of have a really good team of people around us, like aside from the people in the band. We've had a consistent relationship with a lot of these people throughout the past 5 years. Like all of our albums have been recorded and mixed at the same studio, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, not only because the guy that we work with, I think, does excellent work, and especially for the crazy price that we pay to work with him, but we also have a really great personal relationship at this point. Back with the first album, we didn't really know each other, but it's like at this point we've done 3 full-length albums and an EP, and I've tracked other stuff at his studio for like guest solos and stuff I've been asked to do and whatever. So we have a really good friendship with him now, to where, you know, we actually really enjoy being in the studio because it's like we get to, you know, hang out with our friend or whatever. So there's that. And then on top of that, you know, we've worked with the same cover artist on all of our stuff. All 3 albums and the EP have the same artwork. And again, that's a relationship that I assume will continue in the future, which is another thing I really like, is like a music junkie, because it's like I feel like that's one thing that helps really like establish bands, is kind of like creating this image of having all the artwork through all their stuff be consistent, especially like if you take a band like Iron Maiden, they're kind of like the kings of that. And in addition to that, you know, we have we're very fortunate to have a working relationship with a label that we like, and, you know, I feel does good things for us and has, you know, helped us grow. And, you know, the reason that we signed with Inner Wound Recordings back in 2014, when we were getting ready to release Back from the Edge, it had as much to do with the professional, you know, side of things and like what I felt like the label would do for us, as much as it did with the fact that I just genuinely like the guy that runs the record label, and that was very, very important to me, because I just didn't want to entrust, you know, that level of you know, stuff or whatever with our music to somebody that I felt like I couldn't necessarily trust or, you know, have an honest conversation with. So you know, the EP that we're releasing next year will probably be an independent release, and then the 4th album will most likely be through Inner Wound again. We have kind of an interesting relationship with them, where not every single thing we do has to be handled through them, but it's kind of like a mutually beneficial relationship for us to do the albums together. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, I like it. It's more of a distribution deal, I guess, than anything. You know, they don't really retain ownership of the music or anything like that. It's just kind of like a partnership to handle, you know, distribution and pressing and promotion and all that stuff. And, you know, that's kind of the way I like it, that we don't have somebody like hovering over us being like, well, the next album has to be this and it has to be this. And, you know, in order for us to want to work with you guys, you have to do X number of tours a year, or this album has to sell exactly this many units, or, you know, like whatever. I mean, obviously there is an expectation that the albums do well, but yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's a much, much better deal and a much better relationship than a lot of what I've heard from friends and other bands on other labels. So yeah, having all of those people like around us really, really helps keep the ball rolling too, because when we want to do something, when we want to like put an album out or whatever, we don't have to look for those things. We don't have to be like, well, where do we want to record it? Who do we want to have, you know, mix it and master it? Who do we want to have do the artwork? Are we going to go with this label or that label? Are we going to release it independently? You know, having all of those things in place really helps everything, you know, run a lot more smoothly too.
Yeah, without question. I mean, there's so much that goes into the business side of the music industry, that when you are able to get those kind of partnerships where everything just goes as smoothly as it can possibly go in this industry, I mean, it just makes everything go so much better.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks again for taking all this time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in the world of MindMaze right now. I mean, it's got me very excited about everything that's going to be going on in the future. And, of course, being able to help promote the brand new album Resolve, which is now 6 months old, and being the fact that it is the 3rd album and you guys just constantly keep getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it's so awesome to see that, like, from the forum days all the way till now, just like the progression that you've gotten to do as a musician and as a band, and I'm just so very happy for all the success that you've been able to do so far.
Well, thank you very, very much. I mean, it's like I said, it's really, really cool, and there are times where we kind of have to even do double takes about like, whoa, you know, we can't believe that like this happened or that happened or whatever. It's like, again, I have no, you know, misconceptions about the fact that we're still a small band within a small subculture, you know, but I still feel very, very fortunate that we've been able to accomplish what we've accomplished, and that we have the support of like a genuine fan base regardless of the size of it, or whatever, and that we've been able to go out and do these things, and we regardless of, every now and then maybe I have like a period where I feel a little depressed or whatever about like, oh, I wish this had happened by now, or I wish that had happened by now, or whatever. But it's like then you kind of remind yourself that like we've still done more and gotten further than like 99.8% of like all bands. So there's definitely like a time where I have to be reminded to just sort of like I don't want to say count your blessings, but take stock of like the things we've been able to do. And I have moments where I'm just like, yeah, if you would have told me like 5 years ago that this would have happened or that would have happened or whatever, I just never ever would have believed it. So I definitely feel very fortunate to be where we are.